Hello all. Let's start with the next task number 39. Here we will start with a new concept. It's called recursion. Okay. So recursive functions are nothing but any function which calls itself. Okay. A function calling itself is called recursion function. Okay. So we will see one example where we calculate the factorial of a number but with the help of recursion. Okay, so let's begin. So first of all we need a number, right? So let's take an integer and let's call it take a variable called num and let's call it factorial finder. Okay, and let's tell the user enter number, and after that let's get the number num. So our input is done. So now our task is to find the factorial, right? So to find the factorial we need to get the factorial from the function, right? So we will create another variable called factorial or fact, and let's create a function. Okay, let's say I give this number to this particular function. Okay, we have not yet created this function. I'm just showing you the way I'm going to use it, right? So basically I'm going to call this function, and as an argument I will be giving num, and what it has to do is it has to calculate the factorial and give back to me. Okay, so and that factorial I will be storing inside fact. So this is basically my concept, right? So now first I have to define this, right? So let's come over here and define. Okay, so now let's just decide what will be the input type, arguments type. Okay, so because num I am passing and num is an int, so my input argument should be integer, right? So I will just take an int and let's call it, let's say t. Okay, you can obviously call it as num also. Okay, this time let us call it num. Okay, so we have called the number num. Then it is going to do some calculations, and after that it is going to return a number, and that return because in the formula of the factorial it is basically multiplication of the numbers, right? So because it is multiplication of integers will also give you integers, right? So this calculate function will be returning you integer only, right? So this is going to return integer. That we have understood, right? So now our job is to calculate the factorial. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to return. Now this is very important, how this entire thing recursion works. Okay, so basically what happens is recursion is basically a way of doing the same thing again and again, but with a slight variation of it, right? So what I'm going to do is I will just write the code first. Okay, so basically factorial is nothing but the number multiplied by its n minus 1 number, and then multiplied by its n minus 2, and so on till it reaches 1, right? So basically if I enter let's say I enter 5, so its factorial is nothing but 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, right? So this is the factorial, right? So I could write something like this. So to begin with I could write num into, I want to do num into num minus 1, right? So now just look at this, what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to take the same function and call it over here. right? But here instead of calling num, okay, so it will not make any sense if I'm calling num again, okay, because then if it is num again, it will come over here and again it will call the same thing, and this will create go into an infinite loop, right? So but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do num minus 1, okay. So I'm going to reduce the number, okay. So if the number passed is 5, then this will become 5 and then calculate factorial of 4, okay. So then it will come over here, and again this will become 4, so it will come over here, it will be 4 and calculate factorial of 3. Then it will come over here again, this will be 3, so it will be 3 into calculate factorial of, and this will be your 2, right? So it will go on, right? So what happens is at the initial state, let's start from the first, okay. So I call calculate factorial, okay. I will call this function, let me just write down calculate factorial 5, okay. So when it comes over here, so this will translate to, so this is going to return this, right? So it is going to return this, so this will become 5 into, and then it will be calculate num minus 1, and what is num? It is 5, so this will become 4, right? Now this has to be expanded, so this will come back over here, right? So this will be again num into calculate factorial of 1 less than that particular value, that is 4, right? So this will be 4 into calculate 3, right? Then this will be resolved into 3 into calculate 2, right? And then finally this will be resolved into 2 into calculate 1, right? And after this, right now since there is no stop condition, what will happen is this will again go into this function, right? And this will become 1 into calculate of 0, right? And then again, since again there is no stop condition, this will go again, it will become 0 into calculate of minus 1, okay. So now you can see the problem, right? So since till here everything was fine, right? But as soon as 0 comes, this entire multiplication will become 0, right? That means our stop condition should have been, if it is 0 then stop, right? So that is what we have to do, right? So what we can do, that we can come over here and we can do an if statement. Before returning, we will do an if statement. So this is very important in every recursion, this has to be there, okay. So when we do recursion, always remember there has to be somewhere it has to stop, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check num. So whatever num is passed, it should be always greater than 0, okay. So if it is not greater than 0, then it's a big problem, right? So that's what we are going to do. So always it has to be greater than 0, right? So obviously it will be greater than 0, right? So what we have to check over here is it has to be if it is not greater than 0, then what we have to do, right? So we have to stop there. So what we will do is if num is less than 0, okay. So less than or equal to 0, if your number, whatever you have entered or whatever is the function, if that number is less than or equal to 0, then we are going to simply do return 1, okay. So as soon as 0 reaches, this becomes true, and you directly return 1 instead of this return. Okay, so now what happens is 5 will work fine, 4 will work fine. That means when it comes to 5, is 5 less than 0? No, right? So this if statement will not work, it will not run, right? So this return will run, right? So that means it will become 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. It will come up till here, and it will call calculate factorial of 0. Okay, so that means this will become calculate factorial of 0. So as soon as the num becomes 0, so that time this if turns true. Okay, and as soon as this turns true, what the value is returned is 1, right? So that this 0, this entire thing will now be replaced by 1, right? So that is how, and now you can see this is the formula of the factorial, right? So this is how you get factorial with the help of recursion. Okay, so this is very important concept, how to handle recursion. So basically you have to call the same function but with a slight modification in such a way that it every time it does the job of the counter variable of the for loop, right? So it is decrementing every time it is being called, but we have to stop somewhere, right? So that's why this if condition is put, so that the recursion stops at some particular place, right? So once that is done, we have our result. So that comes over here. Now the only task left is to do a printf and print the result of %d is %d. Okay, so basically I just want to print like factorial of this number is this fact. Okay, so I will just write num comma fact. Okay, so this num will be replaced over here and this fact will be replaced over here. Okay, so let's run this. So let's find the factorial of 5. If I press enter, I get 120. Perfect. Okay, so I hope you have understood what is recursion and how to use it to solve problems. Okay, so we'll see you in the next task.